Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. Today we continue our People's Choice Top 100 Board Games of all time, cracking into the top 50 with games number 50 through 41. We've surveyed over 3,300 board game designers, publishers, reviewers, content creators, and enthusiasts, and these are the results that we've come up with. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the list. The People's Choice number 50 board game of all time is Sagrada, and Sagrada is a game that's known for its aesthetic appeal. It's a very beautiful, puzzly game. Each round, at the beginning of the round, players are rolling a pool of dice, and then all the players are drafting from those dice in a snake draft order, and they're taking those dice and they're placing it on their 4x5 player grid, and they're trying to do this in order to accomplish certain objectives. There are communal objectives that all the players are trying to accomplish, and there's also individual secret objectives that each player is trying to fulfill in order to score additional points. However, there are some obstacles, there are some hindrances, because at the beginning of the game, each player is going to draft a particular design grid that they're placing inside their little player board, and that's going to limit and restrict the dice that they could place on their grid. So there are certain colors that cannot be placed on particular spots. There's certain numeric values that can be placed on other spots. Also, there's lots of other additional placement restrictions as far as placing two dice of the same color adjacent to one another, or placing two dice of the same numeric value or pip value next to each other. So these are all things that players have to consider. Cool, again, very puzzly, very heady, not necessarily a thematic game, but a good game for players who like abstracted games and appreciate the aesthetic appeal. Now, last year, Sagrada actually ranked number 48, so it's only dropped down 2 spots. It's holding on steady, but I would like to note the comparison between this game here and Role Player. These are two games that are often compared. They came out around the same time, and they both involve dice drafting and placing these dice in a particular grid for particular reasons. Role Player did not make it at all to the top 100 this year. It actually didn't even really come that close. It got a lot fewer votes than last year when it finished number 96. So I personally am surprised at the success of Sagrada versus Role Player, at least as far as the People's Choice goes. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Sagrada as their number 1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 50. The People's Choice number 49 board game of all time is Dixit. And Dixit is by far the most popular party-style game on the entire People's Choice Top 100. A few other party-style games got some consideration, but not nearly as much. And it's a gamer's style of party game, because in this game, players are playing these cards that basically depict these abstracted images, right? And you're playing these cards, and you're giving a one-word clue. And you're trying to make some or even most of the people around the table guess which is your card based on that clue that you gave. But you also don't want everybody, because if every single person guesses which is your card, then you're not going to get any points. So you want to be somewhat ambiguous, somewhat unclear as far as the clues that you give, but at the same time, you still want at least one other person to figure it out. Great artwork, very radical artwork on these cards, but very excellently made, fun party-style game. The People's Choice number 49. I like to point out that last year, Dixit was actually ranked number 56, so it's actually climbed 7 spots from last year. So this game that's been out for a long time, originally published in 2008, is still growing in its popularity. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Dixit as their favorite game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 49. The People's Choice number 48 board game of all time is Betrayal on the House at the Hill. And Betrayal on the House at the Hill is a horror-themed cooperative game where players are joining forces to complete different scenarios. Now, this game is so popular that it's seen lots of re-implementations. A few years back, there was a Dungeons & Dragons themed reiteration of this game referred to as Last Bastion. Also, it had a legacy version come out a few years as well. And all of these versions actually got some votes as well, but not nearly as much as the original. Now, this game is renowned for having a little bit of a broken element to it. Some people have described this game as being broken. Some of the mechanisms, the features of the game as you interact with them kind of fall apart. But at the same time, people seem to not care. They enjoy the thematic integration, the immersiveness of the experience as they're playing this game. Now, in this game, one player is actually the secret traitor, and all of the other players are trying to figure out who that secret traitor is before it's too late. Last year, Betrayal was actually ranked number 39, very popular. It's dropped down 9 spots, but still holding a very prominent spot at number 48. I'd like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Betrayal on the House on the Hill as their number 1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 48. The People's Choice number 47 board game of all time is Star Wars Rebellion, designed by Corey Konieczka and published by Fantasy Flight Games. And this game here is a 2-player game that can be played with 4 players, but there's still only 2 sides. And it basically depicts the intergalactic civil war between the Rebellion and the Empire. And one player takes on the role of the Empire, the other player takes on the role of the Rebellion. And in this 2-player game, it's basically very asymmetric because one side, the Empire, is trying to locate the secret headquarters of the Rebellion, while the Rebellion is trying to remain undetected. They're trying to accomplish all their other objectives, but not let their home base be discovered by the Empire player. As far as military might is concerned, the Empire has all of the advantage, but the Rebellion player is trying to rally and win the support of the other planets in the galaxy. This game is very popular for its Star Wars feel, its Star Wars theme. This game ranks really high on the BGG Top 100 list, and it does pretty well on the People's Choice. Last year, this game ranked number 43. It's only dropped down 4 spots, so that's really good. Still very beloved in the eyes of the audience. I'd like to give a shout out to the people here on the screen who have chosen Star Wars Rebellion as their favorite board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 47. The People's Choice number 46 board game of all time is Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. Now, I must point out a spoiler here that this game is not the only Gloomhaven title on the People's Choice Top 100. There were lots of votes for the original Gloomhaven, as you can imagine, and a good amount of votes for this one, as you can see, ranked number 48 or 46 on its own right, on its own merit. And there were a good amount of people that did include both of these games in their answers as far as the survey is concerned. So Gloomhaven Jaw of the Lion, as you know, is a successor of sorts, or a prequel almost, to Gloomhaven, the original. Basically, this is a fantasy-themed dungeon crawl cooperative style game where players taking on the role of a band of heroes with different classes, different races, taking on different missions and scenarios in order to accomplish a long campaign. And this game is a legacy style game, as different aspects of the game are going to be permanently affected and modified going forward. And basically, there's lots of content in the original Gloomhaven, and there's a decent amount in Jaws of the Lion. Jaws of the Lion comes with a 25 scenario campaign that players can play through. Lots of material, lots of different bad guys that players can choose from, lots of different upgrades for their personal characters, lots of different stuff going on. Also, Jaws of the Lion is known for its tutorial. It's like a tutorial into Gloomhaven, where the first 5 scenarios, basically, they strip down the mechanisms of the game to slowly walk players through the learning process of Gloomhaven. Once you get to mission 6, you should know all the rules that you need to going forward. Really cool if you like dungeon crawl style games and are open to a Euro style approach to it, because the mechanisms are very Euro, much more deterministic. There is no dice rolling taking place in the game. The mechanisms are basically resolved through card play. If you're interested in that kind of thing, this is a game you have to look into. I would like to point out that last year, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion did get a good amount of votes, but not enough to qualify for the top 100. It still, I guess, was relatively new to the audience and had only come out a few years prior. But this year, it climbed up, skyrocketed all the way to number 46. I'd like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion as their number 1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 46. The People's Choice number 45 board game of all time is Villainous, and in particular, Disney Villainous. And in this game, each player takes on the role of one iconic villain from the Disney universe. And basically, they're all competing and combating with one another in order to determine who's the baddest bad guy of them all. This player features hand management, variable player powers, as each player's villain will have unique powers that are different from all the other players around the table. And this game obviously features lots of take that, because that's exactly what villains are all about making others pay and suffer. Now, this game does have a Marvel Villainous reiteration that came out a few years ago, not to mention a Star Wars version that's coming out in 2022. This game here, Villainous, last year was actually ranked number 49, so it's actually climbed up 4 spots. I'd like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Villainous as their favorite game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 45. The People's Choice number 44 board game of all time is Concordia, designed by Matt Gertz. And Concordia last year was actually ranked number 36. It has dropped down 8 spots, but it's still holding a really high place on the list. And Concordia takes place within a Roman setting, and the board basically consists of a map of the ancient Mediterranean world. In this game, players are sending out their colonists from Rome in order to settle down in cities that produce bricks, food, tools, wine, and cloth. This game does feature an element of deck building as players begin the game with the same exact cards in their hand, but throughout the course of the game, they will be adding and acquiring new cards that distinguish them from all the other players around the table. Now, these cards usually grant players the right to execute particular actions, or if not, they grant them victory points at the end of the game. There are 2 different potential endgame triggers, either when all of the cards have been sold or when one player has built their 15th house. When the game ends, whoever has the most favor among all the different gods in the pantheon is declared the winner of the game. Now, I'd like to point out the people on the screen who have chosen Concordia as their number 1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 44. The People's Choice number 43 board game of all time is Through the Ages by Waterdeep, and this is a civilization themed game for 2 to 4 players, though I wouldn't recommend it for more than 2 because the amount of gameplay for each player is significant. This game here is a very heavy, methodical, cube-pushing style Euro game where players are controlling all the different spheres within civilization. They're controlling their military, they're controlling their farm life, they're controlling their culture and their education, all in the means to score as many culture points, as the game refers to it, or more culture points than their opponent. And this game here features a really cool card drafting mechanism where you have a market of cards that comprise different government systems, different technological upgrades, different historical leaders that you can acquire for your civilization. But these cards have a price according to where they line up in the market. So as the game progresses, these cards are going to be, they're going to slide to the left and they're going to be cheaper. However, they might not necessarily be available. Your opponent might beat you to the punch. So you might want to pay more just to beat them and grab that card before they do. Again, this is a very heavy, methodical, brainy, Euro-style civilization game that really covers every angle of civilization. Anything you can think of as far as a civ game, this board game totally incorporates. I like to point out that this game here, Through the Ages, was ranked number 38 last year. It's dropped down a bit, but again, still holding steady. And that's kind of been the consistency here in this set of 10. All of the games might have climbed up a little bit or dropped a little bit, but it's just that. It's just a bit. They're still staying relatively within the same section among the top 100 board games. I like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Through the Ages as their favorite board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 43. The People's Choice number 42 board game of all time is Anachrony. And Anachrony is a worker placement game with a time travel theme. And apparently this game actually gets time travel right. In this game, players take on the role of humans from the future who have survived the great cataclysm that exterminated the majority of Earth's population and made most of the surface uninhabitable due to the unearthly weather conditions. Now, these surviving humans each represent 4 radically different ideologies referred to as paths in this game. And they're each striving to rebuild the world as they see fit. Now, by powering up the mysterious time rifts that had opened up in the wake of the Great Cataclysm, these 4 paths can go back into particular times in their history in order to affect and change their future. This game features a 2-tiered worker placement system where not only do all of their workers carry out different actions, but they each need exosuits in order to protect them and enhance their abilities. Now, last year, Anachrony ranked number 45 on this list. It's actually climbed up 3 whole spots, so it's climbing up towards the top. I'd like to point out the people here on the screen who have chosen Anachrony as their #1 board game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 42. The People's Choice number 41 board game of all time is Lords of Waterdeep. And Lords of Waterdeep is a worker placement game with a Dungeons and Dragons Waterdeep setting. And basically players are taking on the role of one of the Lords of Waterdeep. And they're trying to compete for the most prestige or the most honor possible by accomplishing different quests. Now, they do not partake in the quest themselves because they are lords. Instead, they use their agents, which are basically their workers that they're going to be placing on the different worker placement spots, in order to recruit different adventurers. And the adventurers are represented by color-coded cubes that represent either fighters or clerics or wizards or rogues. And you're going to need a particular configuration of those cubes in order to accomplish the different types of missions. This game also features a city building element, where as the game progresses, players are going to be taking on actions that add on to the city of Waterdeep, adding additional worker placement spots for players to trigger actions on. Also, the player who's responsible for the building of these, each of these particular buildings is going to gain a reward each time an opponent goes onto that building in order to trigger its action. So you are incentivized to build the city of Waterdeep because you will be rewarded handsomely for doing so. But the heart of the game is these missions that players are trying to accomplish to get the victory points. Now, each player also has a particular class or type of quests that they're going to favor, and based on that, that's going to determine which of the particular quests they will be drafting throughout the course of the game. However, this is secret information. Players might know the quest that you're on, but they don't necessarily know which Lord of Waterdeep you are and which particular types of quests you will favor. Last year, this game ranked number 33, so it's dropped down 8 spots, but it's still very much a loved game. I like to point out the people on the screen here who have chosen Lords of Waterdeep as their favorite game of all time. As far as the People's Choice goes, it's number 41. And that's it as far as today's list goes, folks. Thank you so much for joining us here at Harry Met Board Games. Please comment down below and tell me what you think about this particular set of 10. Also, if you're interested, click on the link on the screen right here and check out my personal 10 favorite board games of all time. Also, don't miss us next time, as we'll be covering games number 40 through 31. That's it for today. Thank you for joining us here. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.